During 19 years of playing rugby, 6 as an amateur and 13 years as a professional, I've obviously heard one or two cracking stories, some of which have made it into my new book, Rugby Tales. Okay, one of the stories from my book comes from my great friend Jason Leonard. As you can imagine, Jason is an absolute legend of the game of rugby, over 115 caps, I think 114 caps for England, and a man who's certainly travelled the globe in terms of his rugby career and the stories and people he's met. And one of those came from a test match in South Africa in 1994. Now let me just picture the scene. Nelson Mandela had not long been released from prison. He'd been elected president of South Africa, and there was a real amazing emotional feeling throughout the whole country. And England were the first team to play against South Africa in the new political South Africa. So we're lining up for the national anthems, and President de Klerk, who mustn't be forgotten in this story, came down the stairs followed by Nelson Mandela, and as often happens or is a custom in some of these games, Nelson Mandela was being introduced to all the players as they came along the line, and Dowie Morris, the England scrum half, was stood next to Jason Leonard. And Jason said, "Oh, you know, I wonder what he's going to say to you, Dowie." And Dowie said, "Well, I've got to think of something I can say to Nelson Mandela, because obviously, you know, I want to shake his hand and make an impression." And Jason, being Jason, said, "Look, you know, Dowie, don't worry about it. Just shake his hand. Let's get on with the game." And Dowie, being Dowie, said, "No, I've got to say something. I've got to say something." So everyone was wondering whether he'd perhaps ask him what it was like to receive the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993, what it was like, you know, spending over 20 years in prison on Robben Island, or even what it might have been like to have been, you know, named as president of South Africa. And as de Klerk came past, you know, Mandela came past as well, and he grabbed, you know, Dowie grabbed his hand, and you know, Mandela quite rightly had an entourage of bodyguards with him, and Dowie sort of wouldn't let go of his hand and sort of, you know, started panicking. And you can see Mandela's trying to pull his hand away, and Dowie wouldn't let go. And he turned around and said the most bizarre thing you could ever say to the president of South Africa, who happened to be Nelson Mandela. He said, "Do you have road tax out here?" Like that. And you know, Jason, who was stood next to him, was just almost sort of bent over double. And Mandela looked very confused at the time, and sort of turned around to his bodyguards and said, "What do we?" You know, it was just absolutely priceless. And there's quite a few stories like that in this book. I think it's going to be, it's very exciting. It's just a real insight into the characters and personalities that played the game, and many of them have shared their best printable story on and off the pitch. And I think it makes a really, really interesting compilation of books. So I hope you enjoy it.